unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good morning. I forgot to bring a peg with me again, which could anchor this in position. Does anybody have a pin? Paperclip or hairpin would work.
There's a hairpin in that corner, John. Of course there is.
Please, yeah. So as they say in the Karate Kid, Buddha provides. So I was getting my little computer called telephone ready last night, and I think Pete asked me if I checked whether the Dharma talk came out or not. I said, no, I didn't. So that was on Thursday night, Dharma talk. So I set it up for Tracy's talk. And when I got home, I checked, and yes, both of them came out. Good. Both of them have been recorded. So most of you will have some kind of cooking appliance at home. So I'd like you to do a little thought experiment. You have an empty pan or saucepan. You light the gas or turn on the electric. Okay. Put the pan on it, and you go to your freezer and you take out a small bag of ice cubes and you pour them into the pan. Assuming the heat is down low, the ice cubes will slowly melt, and then eventually you'll get steam coming off. So the ice has simply changed from ice, or the water has simply changed from ice to steam. That's the thought experiment. Well done. We can call that process simply change, or we can call it transformation. Usually the word transformation is reserved for something more dramatic than simply changing ice to steam. Maybe if you throw the ice into a furnace and it evaporates immediately, we'd be more inclined to call that a transformation. But still, it's simply a change. Most of you can probably remember when you were a teenager. And part of my memory of being a teenager is that from time to time, when I heard the word girls or girlfriend, a transformation would take place inside me. And maybe it's the same when you hear the word boy or boyfriends. As a teenager, it can trigger a release of feelings, emotions, and some vague sense of calling or destiny. Later in my 20s, when I was doing meditation practices with the Western Buddhist order, and there was a lot of talk about the various bodhisattvas and the bodhisattva ideal, meditation practices that really lead to a transformation of consciousness or a change of consciousness. Different people would feel drawn to different bodhisattvas. There's Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom, and Tara, the bodhisattva of compassion. And there's a multitude of other bodhisattvas, or Buddhas. There's not just the one Buddha, there's a multitude of Buddhas. So one of the figures that I was drawn to or felt drawn to was Vajrasattva. And Vajrasattva is kind of the Buddha of Buddhas. It's the primordial, original Buddha. But what was drawn me to the Vajrasattva figure was that it seemed to be this small white figure against an ocean of black. So I was drawn to it. I wasn't doing any Vajrasattva meditation. I was just drawn to this idea or concept, or maybe it was just the artistic representation that drew me to it. But I remember walking in some square, town square, and seeing pigeons at a fountain. And one of them was all white. And I just got this physical tingling sensation of Vajrasattva. It was as though Vajrasattva was manifesting as a pigeon. And then, watching a movie called Betty Blue, at the end, when Betty has died, and I forget what her partner's name was, but he is a writer, and he starts writing in his apartment, and you get a real sense of the heat of France. It's a really hot summer. The window is open, and it's in the dead of night, and a white cat appears on the window ledge and sits down above him while he writes. And I thought, Vajrasattva. So something in us can be activated through a meditation practice. We become attuned to representations. And then those representations are seen in other things, other artistic settings, such as a water font or a movie. We are reminded of what has become important to us. of where we are oriented, and something is triggered in us. You could say that the world, our world, is being transformed. Sangharakshita spoke very eloquently on the topic of vision and transformation. Vision is referring to insight. Insight into the true nature of reality. Insight into the nature of suffering. Insight into the nature of self. And as a result of that insight, there's a transformation that takes place. Transformation in behavior as we align our behavior with that insight. Then there's another part of that transformation, and that is in order to attain that insight, we need to do a certain amount of transformation beforehand. So we start meditating and we start following the precepts, and that combination opens our mind and prepares our mind for the insight to arise. The Buddha says in early Buddhist texts, great and wonderful is the life of ethics when it is set round by meditation. And great and wonderful is the life of meditation when it is set round by insight. So first of all, there is a path where we change our behavior so in such a way that we are actually taking better care of ourselves and that we're taking better care of other people. So we take on board the precepts. Try to keep them as best we can, but also notice how in keeping them, our meditation practice becomes easier because there's less anxiety being generated in our life. And then the meditation practice reinforces our ability to keep the precepts. And then we add into this the study of the Dharma, which helps to open up our minds and challenge the way we perceive the world. From this practice can arise what would be called the bodhicitta, the arising of the will to enlightenment, or the arising of the orientation towards enlightenment. We begin, because our world is changing, we begin to feel and see that enlightenment might be possible after all. I mentioned on Thursday the metabhavana practice. And that is a practice of gradually and slowly transforming our negative impulses and thoughts into positive impulses and thoughts. It is a bhavana practice, becoming, or development, or cultivation. And if we do this practice, our relationships are transformed, and the way we see the world is transformed. Or we could simply say changed. Transformed sounds a little bit more exotic. I had the image today of you get this Christmas present and it's wrapped in exquisite Christmas paper, maybe gold leaf Christmas paper, really, really precious, and you open it, it's just a pair of socks. But what is to say that socks are not worthy of such a wrapping? So change or transformation, we're expecting something that will transform our lives. Well, who knows, maybe a pair of socks will transform your life. So the words, transformation or change. In early Buddhism, and even in later Buddhism, there are 6 realms through which consciousness can migrate. One realm is the human realm, and we like to think that we are in it. But there are some people with the human body that are probably more in the animal realm. And there's probably some who are more in the God realm. So these realms refer more to states of consciousness or modes, modalities of consciousness, rather than actual physical realms. But that does not say that they do not also refer to actual physical realms. There is the human realm, there's the animal realm, there is the God realm, or the divine realm, and then there is the anti-God realm, or the jealous God realm. They have all the powers and all the wonders that the gods have, but they're still not satisfied with it. They're jealous of the gods who have more, and the jealousy kind of poisons their experience of their magical powers. And then there are the lower realms, the hell realm of suffering, and the hungry ghost realm of suffering. Analogies into the human world could be the hungry ghost realm is the realm of addiction, of never feeling satisfied, or that satisfaction is even possible. A continuous, deep-seated craving for something. As the poet Emily Dickinson says, narcotics cannot still the tooth that nibbles at the soul. So it's this realm where there's something gnawing at you from the inside. And the hell realm can be either a war-torn land that you're living in, or something else. You experience personal catastrophes in your life and find yourself going from being relatively comfortable to perhaps homelessness and destitution. That could be a hell realm for some people. So the idea of the bhavana meditation practices is that you can move closer to the divine realm or the Brahma realm. And these meditation practices are called the Brahma Viharas, or the divine abodes. And in your meditation practice, you can get a taste of the divine, the sublime. But in these realms, you're still in samsara. These are the 6 realms of samsara. And you're either moving happily along in the human realm, or moving blissfully along in the divine realm, or moving miserably along in one of the hell realms. As I say, all of these realms are still within samsara. Yes, you can cultivate the Brahma Viharas, and yes, you can definitely experience bliss and tranquility in meditation practice, and even in the life as you walk down the street. That's not really transformation. It may feel like it compared to what it was, and then compared to what it is. It can feel like a transformation, but it's really a change. In each of the realms, there is a bodhisattva, specifically oriented towards the beings in that realm, to help those beings. Let's think about, why do the gods, small g, why do the gods need help? Well, they're still caught up in samsara. They may be having a good time in samsara, but they're still caught up in samsara. And so there is a bodhisattva there playing the lute or flute of impermanence, reminding them this is not going to last. Right? And in the hell realm, well, we have the Seijiki ceremony at Samhain, Halloween, a ceremony where we feed the hungry ghosts. So we are the bodhisattvas in that realm, feeding the hungry ghosts. The only food that will satisfy the hungry ghosts is actually the Dharma. It's the only thing that will stop the tooth nibbling at the soul, or still the tooth nibbling at the soul. And those who are being tortured in hell, there is the bodhisattva of compassion. And in fact, I think I remember Sangharashita saying, well, he was quoting somebody else, but the way to get out of hell is to ask yourself, how can I help somebody? If you ask yourself, how can I help somebody, you're immediately out of hell. You're back into the human realm. In our Zen practice, we don't go in much for these realms. And we really don't spend a lot of effort trying to get into the divine realms. We concentrate more on being present. And what I like about Zen practice is whatever realm you find yourself in, being present is the practice. If you practice being present, no matter what realm you find yourself in, well, you may find it very difficult if you're in the hell realm to practice being present, but assuming that you can get your act together and actually do it. Yeah. And the same if you're in the God realm, where you're just on a roll. You know, sometimes people say to me, I only come to meditate when things are going wrong, right? And it's when you're in a roll and things are going great, well, then you think you don't need meditation. Right? So if you can get your act together when things are going great and actually practice being present, and you practice whatever realm you are in, you practice being present, and gradually you become present, you will see the emptiness or the purity of it all. Each realm has the same purity. Each realm is empty. Then maybe perhaps we can talk about the transformation of consciousness. As soon as you begin to become present, the realm that you are in is transformed. And that transition may be difficult or easy depending on external factors, but also dependent upon internal factors or your karma, the results of your karma, to be more precise. So how much is going on internally will determine whether the transition to being present is easy. In Zen, we put some effort into making that transition easier or facilitating that transition. And the way we do it is through formality and forms. Quite often, you can just step into a zendo, and the way it is kept, the way it is set up, and perhaps even the practice that has gone on there for years and decades, brings you immediately into a sense of being present. The formality of how you enter the zendo, how you take your seat, and how you walk in the zendo, the formality of the ceremonies, all of this is pointing to being present, facilitating your effort to be present. Facilitating that transition from being scattered to being present. But ideally, maybe after some considerable amount of being present, or maybe not, maybe just as it is. You don't actually need these forms. We need these forms, particularly when there's a group of us. Teacher at Zen Center Daigen Lusk, not the Daigen that you know. Married to Arlene, Daigen, yeah. Okay. He said Zen forms is just crowd control. And in some respects, that's true. You can kind of imagine the chaos if we didn't have the forms. And some of us were here at the beginning when we had our first weekend retreat in the hostel. And you can kind of, you've got a visceral sense of the chaos. Yeah. So transformation has happened for Hebden Bridge Zen. Yeah. And that's been a very gradual process, like melting ice on a slow flame. I remember going to Norman once, going to Doksan with Norman, and I had this kind of insight. The microphone doesn't see that. And I said to him, all we can do is take the next step. I mean, this was profound to me. That's all we can do is take the next step. And he said, yes. And each step informs the next step. I thought that's really good. So all we can do is take the next step. And the step that we have taken kind of tells us what the next step might be or is. This is taking us into the realm of what is appropriate. So taking the next step to some extent means that we drop our agenda of where we think we're going. We just take the next step. Yes, we think we're going there, but we're open to what will happen when we take the next step. Because when we take that step, the scene may change. You're now in a different position and looking at things from a different perspective. So is our goal like a mountaintop? And when you take the next step, your route changes? Or is your goal like a star that it's very difficult for the perspective to change because it's more or less fixed? So with this in mind, to me it's more like you're crossing a stream and you can see that there's enough rocks to keep stepping across on. But you don't know exactly which set of steps you're going to take. And it's only when you land on one that you can see which rocks are actually within reach. And it may be that you step on one and the only rock that's in reach is the one that you were on. So you have to go back and take one of the others. So each step informs or shapes the next step. And this comes back to what we were talking about, I think, yesterday with leading and following. The analogy was in playing the Makugyo. We want to help set the pace by playing the Makugyo. But if we find that the assembly is going slow and we try to speed it up, if the assembly doesn't come with us, we have to stop speeding it up. Because then you just get There's probably a technical term for it, but the Mikugyo going at one pace and the assembly going at another pace. So there's an art in leading where you first of all get in step and then move, create a change. And it can work the other way as well. Sometimes the Mikugyo is going too slow, and we all know it. So we try to influence the Mikugyo, but we can't go too much, otherwise you get the same thing. We're chanting too fast, and the Mikugyo is going too slow, and it really sounds disharmonious. So there's the art of listening while we chant, and following the lead. Listening while we chant and making the lead. But we can only take the lead if people are willing to follow. And this is a great metaphor for our relationships and where we want to go with them. We can be forceful in letting people know what we want or what the next step is. Or we can more listen to where we're at in the relationship and what seems appropriate, what is an appropriate next step. So the transformation to me of Zen is being present and trying to maintain that presence, bring it into our activities, and even bring it into our plans. You're present, open to change, and from there you take a step. And then you see how things change because of that step. And this is the way Hebden Bridge Zen has been built. It never seemed as though the situation was being forced. It seemed always to be seeing where people are at, seeing what we can do next, or speaking for Hebden Bridge Zen, they saw what they could do next, did it, and it worked, or it didn't work. And gradually, over time, 10 years, they've gotten, you've gotten to where you are. Or HBZ has gotten to where it is. And there's this great sense that anything can happen. There's a bid in for the hostel. In my opinion, more likely than not, Hebden Bridge Zen will get it. But it might not happen that way. And there's been other adventures into the realm of expansion or improving what is on offer to support people becoming present. Inviting in other teachers. There's the chapter of Hope House. I think Hebden Bridge Zen has sat in every quarter of Hebden Bridge. We've had classes above Blazing Saddles, in the Nut Clough, in Hope House, and in almost every quarter of the Birchcliff Centre. It's flexible, but it's always the stepping stones crossing the stream to where? I have this idea that, you cross the stream, and as you cross it, the other bank keeps moving further back. So yes, you get further across the stream, but you're always only halfway across. And that seems to be our Zen practice. There's always room for improvement. There's always another step that can be taken. We never take the final step. And so the transformation then is in the relationship to the steps. If I'm standing on this stone, what other stones are in reach? And the more I am present, the more I can see the emptiness of the situation that I'm in. And the more I am not in any of the 6 realms. One woman said to me, I really try to meditate every day, but, it's always a but. What I often find happens is that my house is in such a mess. When I go to meditate, I feel as though I have to tidy up this mess first. And then by the time I've tidied up the mess, I don't have any time to meditate. So I said, well, what you have to do is meditate in that mess and say, this is where my life is at right now. In Zen, we're into order and tidiness and wooden floors that are treasured and kept really clean. At Tassajara, the wood has never been treated. It gets a damp mop every day. That takes commitment, time, effort. And the wood is beautiful as a result of that. We take care of our environment, and our environment takes care of us. But having a perfect environment is not a prerequisite to meditation or to Zazen. In fact, a little bit of a challenge can be really good. So going into a city street with all those cars and buses and planes going by and people, seeing if you can meditate. Well, okay, maybe not on your cushion, but just stand still. And let the world go by while you remain centered. If your house is in a mess, if you have time, sure. Put it in order and then meditate. But don't dismiss the idea of meditating in the mess. I remember being at a party a few years ago, and one of the guests was also a DJ, and he brought some DJ equipment, and I think it's rave music that he was playing, and I was listening to it. There's no tune, there's no melody, It's just like chaos. And I thought, I can meditate with that. Because if there's a tune, the tune is just going to work its way into your brain. But the absence of a tune was just great. So I asked Randy, whose party it was, I asked him, do you have a meditation cushion? He says, yes. And I positioned it on the corner of the dance floor and meditated. It was great. So although we put a lot of effort into supporting conditions, it's not as though Zazen can happen only in those conditions. And the fact that Zazen can happen anywhere doesn't mean that we should dispense with those conditions that support it. It's still the greatest ad that I ever saw was when I stepped in out of the rain in Dublin into a storefront, and I looked through the window and it was a shoe shop or a sports shop, and I saw the ad for Nike or Adidas running shoes, and the caption said, "We shape the things we build. Thereafter, they shape us." And I thought, how true. We build television sets and we become a nation of couch potatoes. We build computers and laptops and we become a nation of this. Or mobile phones. The things that we bring into our life shape our life. And with that in mind, we establish Zen temples and Zen centers. We shape them, but then they shape us. The forms, the way of doing things, the etiquette of a Zen temple, that shapes us and helps us in our relationships outside the temple, and helps us to establish being present. Thank you all very much. May our intention equally extend to every being and place.